Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everyone. Welcome back to the MatchNet podcast. Here I am with my dear husband, Robert Cunningham, and hopefully we're gonna do a couple episodes together, or many episodes. We'll see how many. And yeah, so thank you, Robert, for being here with me and have these conversations with me, and I hope it's helpful for everyone as well.
Yeah, these kind of conversations are ones that we like to have, but we don't often have it in front of a camera and with microphones in our hands. But why not? Why not share some of these things that we've learned in our own life and things that we've discussed, and certainly learned from talking with a lot of other people too. I'm open to give this a shot. I guess let us know if you like this. And then maybe I'll come on more.
Yeah, please. So today we want to talk about time, right? How how timing is important in the matching, and how timing looks very different for everyone. So we're going to be talking about our experience, of course, but at the same time from other people's experience, and knowing that each person has their own experience, that it can look different, right?
Yeah. So one place that we can start, which I find kind of interesting, is that timing was not something that people had to consider when going to the matching in the past. Traditionally in our movement, the matching was from God through true parents telling you when you're going to get matched and who you're going to get matched to. So it's just interesting to think that at that time, timing was not something people had to consider. There was a understanding that, hey, I need to be ready for this that is coming, which in some ways is not so different than today, but you didn't get to choose exactly what the timing is. And I guess one thing that I'd like to bring up is the fact that I don't think we actually have as much control in timing as we think there is, as we think we do. You know what I mean?
Yeah. So you're saying that like timing is something that it became more relevant nowadays, like the last couple of years, exactly, on something that we have control of, but the beginning stages, for example, our parents' blessing, they will consider that God is the one who has the time and we don't have control of the time. So right, maybe now is a kind of like a stage where both are starting to connect, and like we have to balance what is like our timing and what is God's timing.
Yeah, and that's exactly what I was thinking too, that it's that because that's how it was done in the past doesn't mean that's how it always has to have been. There was a reason, there was a purpose for why things were done at that time, but now I think things are heading more into a more original way of going about things, where both things are taken into consideration. Our kind of individual kind of circumstances in life and our own kind of like endeavors and things like that, are just our choice, our free will. And then there's this aspect of really trying to seek what is God's, desire for me in my life. How does he want to help me get to where I want to be? And I think sometimes if we focus too much on what we want and how we want things to go, we sometimes don't include the way that God can actually help us to get to that point.
So how was for you? How was your experience in relationship with time?
There you go, yes.
Because, so to give you some context, we met each other in 2016 in a workshop, and I was 19, you were 20. You were in your third year of GPA. Yeah. I was carp leader of Uruguay at the time, and Songhua, like a youth pastor leader. And we went to GTGY and we met, and at that time I felt sparks toward Robert. It was like, oh, he's such a good guy, oh my goodness. But I didn't want to let like those feelings kind of like be affect our friendship, right? And I was in champion, so I wanted to connect with God more than my own feelings, right? So I remember very clearly I went to the tree of the blessing, and I was praying, and I was like, God, please, I offer up my feelings. Please take them. Is this something that needs to happen in the future? You are, I let it go control. I know that you will do something to connect us again, right? In the right time. And the truth is, I always say Robert was the easiest crush I ever had. It passed so quickly. It was so easily to overcome, right? But then life can continue. I have other kind of struggles, right? Other things, and then we connect again in 2018. You already finished GPA. You were in your first year university, and we were talking as friends. But at that time, I was already becoming a matching candidate, and I was getting ready to go to Toronto to do an exchange student program. And my parents were looking for a place where I could stay in Toronto. And at the same time, they knew that I was having this friendly conversations, right, with Robert. By the way, just that I already mentioned his name in 2016. So they knew that he was someone that I have considered, or like it was a good friend of mine, right? So at that time, my parents decided to approach your parents without telling me. And you were not a matching candidate at that time, right? So in a way, like we could say that my time was different than yours, right? Mm-hmm. But what was there for you that you felt that it was your time? Because as well, you reject other people in the past, right? So what was different this time when my parents approached you, like your parents?
Yeah. Well, yeah, that's good. I think giving people a little bit of background. Well, I think it was a feeling that it wasn't the right timing. And I guess one experience I wanted to share was that while I was on GPA, it was the first time ever that my parents called me, as you know, we usually do on GPA, like, you know, once a week. But they called me specifically to let me know that there was a family who was interested in maybe starting a process with me. And maybe some of you can relate, but that's actually a really kind of scary moment, right? Where you realize, oh my gosh, like this is real. This is this is gonna happen. And maybe it was just the reality that although I'd come to understand that this is something that I want very clearly, I just was it still felt very far away. So at that time, everything rushed in one moment. And I had to consider the question, is this what God wants for me at this time? Because that was definitely my perspective towards matching the blessing, was that this is something that God has really kind of prepared for me in one sense, you know, like I really wanted to trust him in this because in one way, I don't know exactly who will be the right person for me. I don't know exactly when the right timing will be. And so in that moment, I was really trying to be, you know, open to God, even if I was scared, like, is this the right time? And I was really grateful that I had a mentor figure at that time who kind of listened to me share my fears and kind of like just shock around this situation. And she let me know that, well, you know, I think there's two things, right? God will give you the right person at the right time. And so if it's not the right time, maybe it's not the right person. And I guess the opposite can be true as well. But that helped me a lot because it just, I guess, reminded me that, yeah, although God kind of wants to help us get to where, you know, the most place of fulfillment and, you know, just to create that beautiful family, he's not going to force it in one way, you know. He will always kind of respect, I think, our choice and, you he's interested to co-create this kind of together. So of course, like if I really didn't feel this was the right time and wasn't ready, that's okay, so that helped a lot, that kind of perspective. But I think it was from that moment that I started to be a little bit more intentional and serious that, hey, this is actually coming, and maybe even sooner than I was initially thinking. Or perhaps it's just something that I can't just keep pretending it's in the future, because I'm getting older, each year is passing, and so that time will come. But it's like, if I just keep assuming, oh, but it's in the future, I'm actually not preparing. I wasn't, that was the reality I had to kind of accept. It's like, how much am I preparing? And I think what that kind of turned me to do is like look at some of these things, some of the reasons why I didn't feel prepared. And a lot of them was like, I guess, unhealthy habits, or things that I was still working on in myself, and just knowing that, oh geez, I don't want to bring this into my matching and blessing process. And so getting back to your question, right, it's I think what was different about that time is that I had taken more like an intentional look at myself and worked on some things that allowed me to feel more ready, feel like, okay, hey, I feel like I am a candidate. Maybe at the time, it's true, I didn't officially do the kind of steps to be a candidate, but I felt like, hey, I am someone who is ready to start this, because I've learned that, hey, I'm not perfect. I will continue to grow, and I will continue to work on things, but I felt I had a solid foundation in how I can grow, actually, how I can be someone who can actually make a shift and change when I need to, how I can make a shift to be that person that I want to be. When before it was a lot like that ideal person that I want to be was always way ahead of me, and I was desperately trying to catch it, but really didn't have a hope of reaching it. But I guess I was just in a place where simply I just felt that person and me, we weren't always lined up, but I had tasted what it felt like to be aligned up with that person. And it was just a matter of like, okay, how do I get more and more back to being aligned? So I think it was just a matter of, I felt more clear and whole as a person. And so it felt like good timing when your family came in. Of course, still, to be honest, I think at that time, I still had the idea that this might be something that will come later. I had actually told my parents about your name as well during our friendly back and forth. But for some reason, I just didn't think it was the exact right moment for me to like send an approach to you. I guess it's hard to let go of some old habits, and I still had the habit a little bit of like not quite yet, a little further down the line. But when a really great proposal came, I had to consider it. And it was then that, we did a 40-day condition together. I prayed about it, and I just felt like, yeah, like I'm ready to give this a chance, to try this. Because for sure, as we both know, trying a process with someone doesn't mean from the get-go doesn't mean that you think they're gonna be that person 100%, right? Of course, you go through the whole process so you can really discover, hey, are we the right fits for each other?
So I have a question for you based on your story. It sounds like your parents telling you every time that there was a proposal for you, even though you were not a candidate, your parents asking you kind of help you to get ready in a way. But at the same time, other people, it can confuse them, It can make them feel like the focus is the person and not so much them being ready individually, right? And then it can confuse them. And that's why sometimes it's not recommended to parents to even approach their kids with proposals when their kids doesn't for themselves say, oh, I want to become a matching candidate, and then first become a matching candidate, right? So for example, in my case, my I don't know if we received many proposals, but my parents were talking about the matching and like people, right? Even before I would become a matching candidate. So we didn't know. It was back in the day where I'm the first daughter. We're still trying to figure it out, right? And I remember that we even sent a proposal, right? Not like in between you and like in between 2016 and 2018, right? And we sent a proposal to another person, another family, right? And I wasn't a matching candidate official, right? But the person was more like, I as well, I thought that the person was more important than me becoming a matching candidate. And at the same time, I didn't know what it meant. It was just like, oh, I felt it was just to say I'm ready, right? And then that family responded that he wasn't ready, but he might be ready in 1 year or two. So it started to be very confusing. Time started to be very confusing because from my side, I felt like I was being guided by God to this person, right? But this person is saying that they need 1 year or 1 year and a half to get ready. It's not a no, it's not a yes, right? And it sounds like I had to wait for this person, right? But yeah, it just started to get very confusing, right? The whole thing. And I felt, and then when I started to get on my head, and then I started to feel like, this is like, if it's not with this person, I will not consider anyone else during this year and a half. Then I was like, I think I'm not actually ready, because this proposal and this feeling of being ready is being attached to one specific person, and not being attached to me being like feeling actually ready and being a fulfilled person. So in my case, I benefit from getting ready myself, and I told my parents to not talk to me any names, to not mention any other options until I become an official matching candidate, right? And then I took 6 months to become an official matching candidate at the end of 2017, and I focused really well on responding to questions, on creating a profile, and kind of getting to know myself, right? I created a profile even though I didn't post it on the website. I was willing to post it on the website, but maybe after 1 or 2 years that we were like, after looking for 1 or 2 years from our side, right? So I guess why I highlight this point, I want to know your opinion about it, but at the same time, it's kind of like interesting that for you, the fact that your parents told you every time that a proposal came in was helpful to get your mind ready for the matching, right? So what is your opinion about this?
That's a great question. And I would say that even in your own story, it sounded like the first person that, it was your parents who suggested that person to you, or their family reached out to you?
No, our family proposed that to them.
Oh, okay. I see. So it sounds like even that situation helped you to realize, hey, I can't, your whole thing you just shared, like, I can't just be, like, my readiness isn't dependent on this kind of one person, let's say, or like, I should, like, that scenario of like, do I wait for this person or not, maybe kind of distracted you from the real thing you wanted to be working on, is like, am I ready as a person myself? Like, how am I becoming prepared? So just interesting that even that kind of maybe helped be the fuel. So just a thought I have is like, I think we got to allow there to be some level of open communication with our parents, and just know that nothing is really going to be a wrong step, You know what I mean? Like, that scenario, like, that's not a failure in any regard, in any, it's just part of your process. So I guess I just know of some people who are very strict with their parents, don't tell me anything, but maybe even from the very beginning, right? They wouldn't even allow something like that to occur, right? It's like, I know I don't want to, I'm not ready, so I don't want to even like consider these things at all, like any other kind of proposal and stuff. And honestly, it's okay. Like, your choice ultimately, right? But I think if we can be as open as we can be, with our parents, in our conversation, just kind of come with that sense of openness, that's where I think we allow God to work the most in one sense. So I think I just personally never told my parents, oh, don't tell me a name, even if I wasn't ready at the time, because I guess at the time I still had some kind of like belief that, hey, maybe I'll get a feeling, you know, maybe I'm not ready, but I'll get this feeling when someone approaches that, oh my gosh, wow, that something feels right about this, you know, something, maybe I'd feel God's hand in this, you know. So I guess because I didn't want to close the door to that, I wanted to remain open to that, even if I wasn't 100% in that area. So I guess that's where you and I were a little bit different. Maybe I hadn't quite nailed down that point that, you know, I have to make sure I'm 100% ready. I think I was like, as I'm getting ready, I can continue to leave that door open, because who knows? Like, I guess I was still open to this feeling that God may like come as a voice. This is the one.
I guess that's the part where you wanted to leave the door open for God. If God called you, okay, hey, my son, this is your time.
Exactly. But I've come to learn, I don't think that's how it works.
But I think like maybe for men, they need a little bit more of that push.
Maybe so. Maybe. I think it was healthy because it just helped me to continue to realize this is real. This is coming, you know, I need to prepare. Maybe more than women. I can't say 100% sure, but guys might have more of a tendency to avoid, you know, and to kind of not maybe confront and acknowledge the emotions that are within them, that are afraid, that are anxious, that feel insecure about this whole thing. And kind of in the desire not to look at those things, we kind of close ourselves off from that and just kind of try to focus on other things. And a lot of times, you know, I think a lot of people choose to work on great things. Like, oh yeah, I'm going to just focus on my studies right now. I'm just going to focus on getting that first job. I'm going to focus on getting more money in that bank account, right? And it's all great goals in and of itself. But I think sometimes if that's the only thing that we're kind of focused on and not working as well on more like those internal things, kind of really coming to answer that question to yourself, it's like, what am I so afraid of actually, you know? Because a lot of times if we just came to sit with that, settle with that, just really have an honest conversation with someone, we'll realize that the fear is kind of irrational and that there is no reason for me not to go forward. This idea that I have in my head is just that. It's just an idea. It's nothing really substantial.
It's very interesting because your matching preparation was focusing more on time, right? On like feeling God's timing and getting ready for God's timing, right? When my matching preparation, like it was at the beginning more focused on the person, right? So the same way that you felt like you wanted to leave a door open for God to tell you this is the right time for you, you know? For me was I wanted to leave the door open for God to tell me this is a person, right? So in my imagination, I was kind of like imagine that when I met the right person, I will feel it, you know, God will tell me, and I was like, I'm gonna have a spiritual experience around it, right? And almost like maybe to movie like idea, fairy tale style, princess kind of movie, romantic, first love of first sight, yeah. Which not luckily, but it wasn't that way. And my mind tricked me several times of like, something that I learned is that when you wanna see signs, you will see them because you will make anything a sign.
Well, that's tricky though. Then like, how can you differentiate between, say, the signs that you want to see, right? That in one, it sounds like you're kind of making up, and then like real signs. Because I know you're someone who believes in real signs. Or like, what does it even mean, you think, for there to be a sign, especially in this kind of context of the matching? Are you someone who now believes? Because almost for me, I've come to the point where, yeah, like you did a good job of distinguishing kind of the difference between both of us in the matching process. But the one similarity is that we both were kind of looking for some kind of sign of God. So it's just like, do you think that is an aspect of matching in reality?
Good question. I feel, and that's where like I feel timing in like God's timing is the biggest sign that you can see, you know. Like for example, my other experience where I thought I had a sign with God, it wasn't nothing connected with timing, right? Both of our timing, it was more connected with this kind of like the person and what similarities we have, or what kind of ideas, you know. I imagine, and then with you, it just felt right. The timing felt right, like everything felt right, you know. Even though I was afraid of rejection and it was a lot of things, it just felt right. Like when something is in the right time, it just feels right, you know. And I don't know how to describe it. And we were having a discussion with other staff and people from BFM, and we were like, oh yeah, telling people that it feels right is not enough. Like
yeah, it's a little vague. Yeah. But a thought I have of maybe what helps to distinguish what feels right, I think there's a clarity, there's a lack of contradiction. I think that are maybe signs of something feels right, actually. Because I think someone might hear, oh, something feels right, but then they'll just assume that, oh, that's got to feel like just you feel happy.
Yeah.
But I think you can't base it off of just like these fleeting emotions in a sense, or things, because emotions will come and go. But I guess like there's like no overall sense of contradiction.
Yeah.
I think that's a big sign of right.
When I was giving birth, it was painful. Didn't feel like good. But it felt right.
There we go. Yeah, it's like this is what's supposed to happen. This is what needs to happen. This is what I want to happen. Right? Yeah, it's like it's almost like all those three kind of things kind of lined up. What needs to happen, what I want, what is happening. Like you just see like kind of these different like tracks kind of converge into one, and it's like I'm aware there's other possibilities, but this is the only one that really makes sense to go forward with.
Yeah, and I mean, even like how it started. I became a matching candidate. My parents were looking for a place for me to stay in Toronto. They contact with a family in Canada who asked them about your family. And then it just turned out that your family were visiting his family, so they were like, okay, we know their family, they're gonna come in like 2 days, we can ask them in person, right? So they went in person, they asked your parents, and then the same time during those like 3 days, you sent me a message saying, hey Carina, has been lovely to talk with you, you're an amazing sister, I'm preparing for the matching process, and I think it's better for us to pause our back and forth conversation. Like, he was very polite, but basically he was telling me, let's stop talking. So that was your message, and then I got really like it was just hours before I learned that my parents have approached this family, right? And I was really upset because I was like, oh my goodness, he told me no, right? And I was like, wow. I was upset with my dad because of that, right? Like, look at that timing. And then 2 days after that, your parents came back to your house. And
yeah, they were
happened?
on a small vacation. And so I didn't get the proposal immediately. You know, my parents waited till they came home so that we could talk in person. And so when my dad told me, oh, there's a nice family from Uruguay who reached out to us, you know, with a proposal. And of course, I knew exactly who that was, right? There's not that many people in Uruguay, especially, you know, one that would make sense. So I knew it was you. And then he also mentioned it's the Mendezes. And it was, at that moment, I remembered my message, and I was like, oh shoot, she's gonna interpret that message to mean a no to the proposal, but that's not what I meant. So I had to quickly go on my phone and type out a message like, hey, like just letting you know, like we got your proposal, but that was not like what I just said there was not a response to that proposal. Like, but then I was like, incidentally, we probably should take time either way so that we can kind of figure out if to move forward or not with this.
Then I received your message about it, and I was like, wow, what is going on here, right? Like, and then we did the 40 days where we pray, and then you get ready. You became almost like a candidate. You did at least your profile. And then we started those 40 days. We didn't talk, we did prayer. And I remember feeling like by the end of the 40 days, like not nervous at all. I was like, whatever happens, it's going to be okay. You know, like even if he tell me no, it's okay. You know, like that was a feeling like everything is going to be okay. Right. And there was peace in my heart. And which is, it is different, right? When you're like focused on one person and the focus of like is the person and not the timing and not God, then it there is a lot of anxiety, right? Because what if the person say no? You know, it's about the person, not the time and not God's guidance, right?
Yeah. Well, it sounds like there's a lot of expectation. You've kind of put all your hopes in this one basket in one sense. And so you're afraid and more anxious probably because you're afraid to be disappointed, right?
Yeah. And you know, when you have a crush or you think about someone, it's like you think that that person is the only person, right, that could make you happy, right? But when you focus on God and when you focus on time, then it feels different, right? It feels like, well, God knows his time and it's gonna be okay either way, right?
Right.
So yeah, I mean, our story is kind of like one example of how timing kind of looks like, and it can be chaotic, right? I mean, our story was very chaotic, but it was kind of like we could see that the timing was amazing, right? Like from your message to my parents' time approach to etc., right?
Things kind of flowed in one sense.
Yeah, exactly.
Especially in hindsight.
Yeah. And that the same happens to other people who wait 10 years to find the right person, right? And then they're looking and they're trying with several people. It's like once they find the right person, things flow, things feel right, you know, and the time is correct for both sides. So I think what your mentor told you when it's guided by God, it's not only the right person, it's the right time. I truly believe that.
Yeah.
But at the same time, I do believe that sometimes the right time, it looks different for each person in a way. And sometimes God, the right time is a push from God to kind of like get ready, finish things, right? You know what I mean? So it's like no, sometimes the right time means that everything is perfect, you know, but sometimes we need to give room for getting ready for God's time. Like he's gonna give us signs. He was gonna tell us like, hey, this is your time, like you need to do this jump.
Yeah, I'd like to add to that. You know, I think this is just a rough analogy, but it's almost like if God's timing is like a train that we need to catch. If you didn't take the steps to like, okay, well, hey, I'm not exactly sure when the train's coming, so I better wake up at a good time, get myself ready, make sure I get to the station prepared and be there to wait. So, but I think the opposite that I feel like a lot of people sometimes do is that, oh, I don't feel ready, therefore I'm not going to get prepared. right? Because I'm not ready. So it's like, why do I even need to like focus on that area in one sense? Or maybe they're waiting for some sign, right, from God, right, that will make it feel like, oh, this is the right time, and then I'm going to start, right? But I think a lot of times if we want to kind of recognize God's timing, when we want to recognize when something feels right or not, we got to do those kind of steps to get there. And this might be a whole nother podcast episode topic, but I think the aspect of like getting ready doesn't mean you're going to jump into it the next day, right? you telling maybe your parents like, hey, I'm ready, and I want to start preparing, doesn't mean they're going to be like, perfect, and pull out like a picture of someone and be like, here we go, you're getting matched tomorrow. Like, no, like nothing moves that quickly, right? But it's like, because things need periods of growth, as we understand from the principle, right? That we understand just from looking at nature, right? You plant a seed, sometimes you don't even see anything happen until like days later, and then the sapling comes out. And you might think, oh, shoot, the seed didn't grow, that's it. No, it needs that time to grow. So I feel like this preparation period before anything even happens is so important. But yeah, when people just, don't feel ready and they just kind of stay with that, then they don't take those steps that involve getting ready. And I think from both of our stories, sometimes it can look totally different, but sometimes it even includes being open to hearing from your parents. Hey, someone may have reached out, or even talking with the parents, like, what if we, like just having that kind of conversation about it and not being afraid of it. Again, this is a totally different topic, but it reminds me a lot, honestly, about when we were preparing to have our first baby. And yeah, I mean, you remember very well, right? I didn't want to have the conversation because I didn't feel ready. And I was scared. I was just scared of it. I didn't know why exactly, and I was honestly just kind of avoiding that feeling. And anytime that you wanted to just talk about it, I kind of interpreted that in my mind that she wants to have a kid now, she's ready and I'm not, and that's uncomfortable. When, we had to just have a really serious conversation and just, hey, like, Robert, I just want us to talk about this so that we can like do what's necessary to get ready and just kind of get on the same page. Like, you wanted to understand me, where I'm coming from, and I was just kind of afraid. So it's interesting. We've talked about a lot of times how there's sometimes a similarity there, right?
Totally. Yeah, there's a similarity. Yeah. I can imagine having a baby. It's different, but yeah, there's a similarity.
Yeah.
I like your analogy about the train, and I just want to clarify that there's not only one train. And if someone missed the train, that doesn't mean that it's missed forever.
That's great.
There's like...
God's like constantly sending the trains. Yeah, he's like, oh, don't worry, I got you another one. It's coming.
I mean, there's plan... I don't like A, B, C, D, E, C, because it sounds like each kind of like... They're less, It's like the first one is better than the second one. I don't like that order, but it sounds like almost a little bit like you like Marvel multiverse, like your choices and like the timing will create different kind of like a multiverse, right? Like different result of life. Of course, like if I marry with another person, it will be a different story's life. So I don't know why, how, like time is very interesting, but I'm just saying that there's just different set of combinations. Yeah. Right.
And we shouldn't get caught on the idea that, oh, that would have been better if this, you don't know.
Yeah.
Right. Like we can think all day in our imagination, oh, this choice, that person would have been better. It's like, no, the life you have is perfect. I think that's the attitude that we need to come to have about our lives.
Yeah.
Because so much of it, actually, we don't get to choose. Right? We don't get to choose when we're born. We don't get to choose which family we get born into.
Yeah.
And it's like, even if there's challenges, we have to just kind of come to a place, I think, where it's like, hey, this is where God wants me to be.
Yeah. And there might be mistakes too, right? Like there are people who got blessed very young, or the other person. And this is the thing with matching is that, and blessing, right? And family, it requires the two sides, right? So there's like my responsibility, your responsibility, the other person's responsibility. Like each person needs to fulfill their responsibility in order for things to work, right? So sometimes the other person doesn't fulfill their responsibility. Sometimes I may like the sister makes a mistake, right? The woman makes a mistake, the man makes a mistake, etc., etc. There are many things, nothing guaranteed, right? So just to clarify that if you miss a train that maybe was sent by God, it's gonna be okay, right? Like you just the thing is, like, I think we just need to learn. If you learn from that, then it's good. And maybe that's what you needed, right? To learn something about that train, to learn something about that. Sometimes there are trains that take us to another station. Ooh, right?
This analogy is growing.
And that station take us to a whole new perspective that we were not considering, right? So it's just important that fact, that God's timing will come up, and it will come up again as well, right?
I'd like to kind of mention one other kind of aspect, I think, of God's timing, and it relates a little bit back to what I was mentioning about the tree. It's okay we get into that?
Sure.
Trees, animals, whatever, anything, even ourselves, right? We know we go through kind of a natural progression of growth. So I just wanted to get into one more kind of, I guess, idea around this idea of God's timing, and it relates back to the tree and the seed, but just all things of nature, right? They all will grow, right? Even ourselves, right? They're like somehow inherently our body, our mind knows how we need to grow. And I think, honestly, in a more original sense, we should be able to do that in these things, like knowing when, hey, it's time to do the matching, it's time for me to like connect with someone else, and then create this family. And then when you're married, it's the right timing to have our baby, and so on. And kind of there'd be a harmony between your timing and God's timing. Of course, that's very idealistic sounding, but I think a lot of times, again, if we think of like nature, there's no like contradiction. There's no fear like, oh, like I can't do that, or that's not for me. I'm not going to be ready for that. There's just like a trust, in the whole process of things, Anyways, I came to this idea at some point, and this is kind of just through reflecting on my own life, and then also through talking to mostly a lot of brothers, that I've helped kind of in their journey to work on their sexual integrity, and partly to kind of prepare for the matching, is that our kind of growth in life, especially as like a single person, is like a spiral that continues to go upward and outwards as you kind of expand, reaching higher and higher. And this is kind of our single life. And we're trying to get to this point where we're ready to enter the next stage, which is like marriage, where then you're kind of combining two lives together, and you've entered a new kind of higher orbit almost, where together with your magical spouse, you'll continue to go further outwards and higher as well. But the way I've kind of pictured it is that there's actually a little bit of a gap between that individual life and getting to, being in a couple, to be married, to be blessed. And actually that's kind of like where we need a leap of faith. It's not just a smooth curve, but there's a literal jump that needs to happen to go there. But you can't make that jump if you're from down here still. So I think that's where we need to keep moving forward in our lives as an individual, creating that momentum for when we're close to that point and we're ready to take the jump. And it's not as difficult in one sense. The reason I bring this up is that I've noticed that some people, they get to that point, but I guess maybe because they're so set on things need to be perfect, their external circumstances, maybe they just have a really high standard for themselves and the kind of person they want to be. But they kind of ride this upper limit. But I think the reality is, if you've hit that cap, you can't really go any higher until you take the jump to go higher. So you're kind of trapped there. And the reality is, if you can't move forward, I think then the tendency is typically to kind of go backwards and to fall back. And again, it's just something that I've seen, this kind of pattern that, people when they get to this place where, hey, like I'm ready to take the jump to the matching, but they don't, then actually things in their life start to kind of go backwards again. They get caught up again in old habits and things, that they don't want in their life, because they're not kind of progressing in the natural flow of life. They're kind of going against what their heart, and I guess you could say the original mind, or things they're ready for. They want to go to that place. But if we kind of like, hesitate to do that, and don't do that, then we can revert back and kind of almost like slide down.
Yeah, totally. I think this is such an important, not analogy, but for thing to consider, like coming back to connecting the analogies with the train, right? It doesn't mean that another train will not pass, but it will just take more time and sometimes some regression, you think
that's part of it?
Yeah, it's part of it, right? Like having some regression in how in your case, who you work with, brothers who are struggling with pornography and masturbation, right? Like when things don't move forward, then it might move backwards. And I don't agree that it's 100% always is the case, Like I don't agree with the concept, if you're not moving forward, you're moving backwards, Like I think like that's a little bit scary, kind of like a judgment,
Sure.
But I do believe that sometimes if we miss the time, right, and we don't do that leap of faith in the right time, then things will be a little bit of a struggle. But I believe that every struggle, if we overcome it and if we like really deeply connect with and learn from it, then we will always be a better person than we were by the time that we felt we were on our highest, Like our peak is gonna be always highest than the peak that we thought we were, even if you felt that you were lower, right? So
because you've just kind of you have deeper understanding of things, of yourself, you've learned more, experienced more.
Exactly. Like we sometimes think that we're in the peak, but then we have to go down a little bit more, and then we'll have the strength to go to a higher peak,
I think that's actually what your father talked about.
Yeah, like water needs to flow,
and we have to be ready in life sometimes to kind of go to the bottom, but knowing that next time we're gonna go to higher heights.
Yeah. So yeah, I coming back to time and then maybe concluding now that I don't even know how much time we've been here. I believe that I think it's really good analogy that you're just sharing, and I think it makes sense in order for us to pay attention of timing, right? And sometimes, as you said at the beginning, we have to give room for listening to God's time, that it can look different to our time, but at the same time, the more time it passes, we're always going to become more wise and learn more, right? Like the difference is sometimes we go through that process with someone, and sometimes we go through that process individually, right? So in our case, that we got blessed young, we went through the process kind of like individual but together too, right? And we're still gonna go through into that process. But I truly believe that those who got married, in their 30s, because they were struggling to find, etc. Like there were many reasons why they got blessed at the 30s. I don't believe they are, they are probably as wise as I'm gonna be in my 30s soon, So it's just like my learning, I do it together with you, or like we were witness of each other's growth in first person, but then as an individual you're still growing even if you are by yourself. So I don't think there's ever a waste of time, as long as we're not avoiding something, as long as we are being intentional, and as long as we are trying to move forward, right?
Yeah. Well, and I think that was a great point, and I'll take that as feedback if I ever introduce this model again to society. Take it outside of my mind. But yeah, it's absolutely, true, this fact that, we can never just see something as like a failure and feel like we're a failure. And that's, I think, when we regress, is when we think this has been a failure and I failed and, you know, almost I did something wrong kind of, you know. But if we kind of take it to be something learning, then we'll continue, I think, to progress and to learn, as you say. And I think as well, I think it's important to note that there's so many ways in life to also move forward for ourselves. Sometimes we might get too like tunnel vision on one thing. Like the only way that for me to progress is that I need to get matched and blessed. But the reality is there's so many other kind of elements of ourselves and aspects of our lives that we might need to progress as well in order to help us to get matched and blessed, or just and maybe they'll happen at the same time. But it's like, I think it's just important, and I think people, especially with age, come to understand that kind of fact of life, that there's different elements as well, and we shouldn't get too caught up on one thing. And if it doesn't happen the way we want it to, then everything fails. And I failed as a person. I'm back to square one. It doesn't have to be that. So anyways, I appreciated that kind of point about this.
Yeah. And well, I think we can wrap up here about this timing. There's much to say, but we will keep it for next episodes. If you want to learn more about matching, please join MatchNet. It's an amazing platform for you to learn more about the matching, the blessing, and get ready for it, even if you don't feel ready. As we were just talking about it, right?
Yeah, I think it's designed to help you to be ready to feel ready.
Exactly. Totally. And yeah, if you like having Robert here in the podcast and you like these conversations, please let us know so I can encourage Robert to be here more.
Yeah, thanks for inviting me. And I just hope this has been good food for thought. Like, I think one thing we talked about before we started this podcast is that, oh my gosh, everyone's story is so different. Everyone's experience is so different. So we just hope that this kind of is something to help contribute to your unique journey in this. You know, it just gave you some food for thought, essentially.
Exactly. So yeah, thank you everyone for being here, and see you next time.
Bye-bye.